You just had the First World War, you know, it finished had a devastating impact across Europe, and so people are kind of reflecting on what does it mean to be human, what makes us human, those kinds of question. And this kind of context is what inspired Chowk to kind of write this play. This is one picture that you all know what it is when you see it. It's a familiar looking image. It's something that probably we all have some personal experience with, right? This is a chest X-ray that would be taken in your doctor's office, for example, or a radiologist's office. Climate change will result in less production and less food. It is difficult for developing countries to deal with climate change due to their financial status and other issues. There are many people living in hunger, especially in Africa. The climate change has devastating effects on world economy. You might think that space appears dark at night because that is when our side of Earth faces away from the sun as our planet rotates on its axis every 24 hours. But what about all those other faraway suns that appear as stars in the night sky? Three stages of brain development. Brain development during childhood. There are three stages, starting from the primitive brain, the action brain, limbic brain, feeling brain, and finally to the neocortex, thought brain. Although interrelated, the three had its own function. I believe our borders should be open. But if that is not politically acceptable for now, Europe should at least open up a legal route for people from developing countries to come work here. Over time, hopefully, we can move to a position where borders are completely open. Persuading skeptics won't be easy. In 1845, the French social reformer Victor Considerant wrote, "Paris is an immense workshop of putrefaction, where misery, pestilence, and sickness work in concert, where sunlight and air rarely penetrate. Paris is a terrible place, where plants shrivel and perish, and where, of 7 small infants, 4 die during the course of the year." What we found is a very simple and direct way of measuring a competence that seems to make an important life difference. A researcher tells these preschoolers that she's going to leave the room if they wait for her to come back without eating the marshmallows. Here, just the motherly launching just hundreds of genes in one shot, and it changes them in a very stable way that you can look at the old rat and you can say whether it was licked or not. But you can also say by behavior. These provide the spark that will ignite your sample when your sample burns or combust that gives off energy. So how is the energy collected, or how did a scientist figure out how much energy is being given off? Well, it's a closed system. There's a lid here that goes on top of this calorimeter, and what's in here, in the lid, is a stirrer. The interaction between genetics and experience that shapes brain architecture is embedded in a reciprocal relationship, the relationships that children have with the adults in their lives. And by that we mean what we refer to as the serve and return nature of children's interaction with their adults' development. The law states energy cannot be created or destroyed. Energy can be described as the ability to do work, where work is the movement of matter when a force is applied to it. A closed system is a system in which no matter or energy is allowed to enter or leave. The first law of thermodynamics tells us that the amount of energy within an ecosystem is constant. It doesn't change. Why is sport universal? Why does everybody play football? It's because the values are specified at a very thin level at the top. There are these rules, and we all have to abide by just these rules. But there are lots of things about football that aren't rules specified. So Brazilian football is different from Italian football, from British football, from German football, from Spanish football. Successful schools depend on the resources and support of their communities, and schools at the center of their communities are often the most successful schools. In turn, schools are vital to the social health of their local communities. Also, families are the first social unit in which children learn and develop. Most of us only have a vocabulary of 50, 60, 70,000 words, whatever it is, until there is always something to learn. So remember that two ends of child language acquisition are wider apart than some people think. That means there is more scope for studying in it than most people think. Mars is a terrestrial planet with a thin atmosphere, having surface features reminiscent both of the impact crater of the Moon, and the volcanoes, valleys, deserts, and polar ice caps of the Earth. The rotational period and the season cycles of the Mars are likewise similar of those of Earth, as it was the tilt that produced the seasons. Free sugars include these same sugars, but in this case they have been removed from their naturally occurring source, rather than being eaten as natural parts of fruits, dairy products, and some vegetables and grains. This includes sugar that is added to food and drinks by food companies, cooks, or consumers. According to the content analysis results concerning this finding, unlike female students, male students were more interested in technological developments. This finding is not surprising when the passive social role of females and the general social structure in which they tend to more sociable fields are considered. Approach and avoidance motivation is composed of three conceptually distinct components. Approach indicates a propensity to move toward, or maintain contact with, a desired stimulus, such as vocational plans. Avoidance indicates a propensity to move away from, or maintain distance from, an undesired stimulus in order to reduce anxiety. Some principles of absolutism cannot be violated or betrayed, and they have wide acceptance with no assumptions or exceptions. There is a boundary line that tells what is right and what is wrong. The idea of absolutism is that nothing is dependent on situations.